Howdy everyone, and welcome back to The More You Grow. I'm here in the greenhouse today and I'm going to be showing you how you can grow your very own fresh and delicious turmeric in containers that you can use in your kitchen. Turmeric is one of the plants that I recommend for people the most because it is very easy to grow in containers. It's a beautiful plant as a container plant, and in the end you get a bountiful harvest of these beautiful turmeric rhizomes that you can use in all kinds of dishes. So I'm going to take you from step to step on how to get it planted to grown and then how to care for it once you've got it grown. So let's go check it out. Turmeric is a crop that is originally grown in Southeast Asia for its beautiful and delicious rhizomes. These rhizomes add a wonderful orangish yellow color to anything it's added to. Adds a beautiful flavor. It's often associated with Indian cuisine most often. It's used by a lot of cultures around the world though. It's also used in medical applications. People will sometimes use this as a type of all-natural blood thinner. Just be sure to consult your doctor before you use it for any kind of medical applications, or if you're planning to grow this and eat it, make sure that it's not going to harm any of your medications or any kind of health issues that you have. Anyways, let's talk about how we get these started and where we begin. So the first thing you're going to need to do to be able to start and grow your own turmeric is you have to find a source of fresh turmeric rhizomes, which will look something along the lines of this. The way they grow, they are grown by asexual propagation. So in other words, they don't start from seed. You got to start them from the rhizomes. And these rhizomes have buds along the stems of it. That will be where the new shoots come from. As far as if you're trying to locate some fresh turmeric, I actually started this from the grocery store, which is actually why I'm adding it to my grocery store growing playlist. I got this from the local HEB when I lived in College Station. They just had a pack of the rhizomes and I just took them, planted them up, and here we are today getting fresh turmeric 3 years later from the plants that I grow myself now. So check your local grocery store. A lot of times around the ginger and specialty foods you can kind of find some fresh turmeric sometimes. If you can't find it at your grocery store, be sure you check online. I'm sure you can buy turmeric rhizomes, fresh turmeric rhizomes online in online stores. There's different varieties of turmeric you can get. There's the yellow variety, the orange variety, there's even some white varieties of turmeric. So there's a lot of different kinds you can grow, and that's kind of just up to you to what you're really looking for and what you'd like to try to grow. So I'm going to try to grow some of those as well at some point, but for today let me just tell you how I get our orange turmeric started. So let's go back here and let me show you how we get this planted up. Once you found your source of turmeric rhizomes, the first thing I like to do is break them into smaller pieces depending on the size that you start with. I like to make sure that they're no smaller than a piece about this size, because you're going to have enough buds on this rhizome that it's going to ensure that you get good growth. Each one of these kind of knobby areas, that is the bud of the rhizome. So in this case I've got 4 on this small piece, and this is going to be a really good start, or a really good piece to start with. I have some smaller pieces here that have like 2 buds on them. I normally don't like to get them this small just because they have a higher chance of not being successful or drying out or withering away before they get started. These I only have them because they broke off of the plant I just harvested recently, and might as well give them a shot. I also have these large pieces. You could potentially break these into smaller pieces if you want, but I prefer to leave these whole just because of how they are, pretty much how they're arranged. This one's got 1, 2, 3, 4 buds on it. So the number of buds is really what helps me determine how big the pieces are. Even though this is a really big piece, it's only got 4 buds on it, just the same number as the small piece does. I want to make sure there's multiple buds per piece in case one of them is not successful. That way it ensures one of them will have a higher chance of growing, of getting started, of growing, and turning into a healthy plant. The next thing that you want to do once you have cut your pieces apart is you want to let them suberize. Suberize is just a fancy term for letting the cut parts heal. You want to let these open spots heal up. They'll dry over and kind of create a callus. And the reason why you want to do that with any kind of plant that you're propagating asexually and cutting, things like potatoes, ginger, and in this case turmeric, You want to let them suberize because it will decrease your chances of rot happening, because they could rot on that cut piece, or getting disease into your piece that you've planted. You don't want to get fungal diseases or bacteria inside of that plant if you can help it. So I let them sit on my kitchen counter or on a table for about 2-3 days, just until that cut part is nice and dry and there's not any kind of way that it would expose it to rot or disease. At that point, all we have to do is we got to get them potted up. All right, like I said before, once you've allowed your pieces, your rhizomes to suberize, it's time to get them planted. All I have here are some small plastic containers with good drainage on the bottom. And the reason why I like to start with small containers is because you're using less potting mix. You don't know if these are going to sprout or they're going to take. Some of them may not. And then you won't waste as much potting soil in that way, and it doesn't take up as much space. You don't need a huge pot to get started because you'll eventually transplant them later anyways. So I take a rhizome piece. I usually like to have them about this size, big enough that it's got enough buds on it but not too big. And I take it, I will plant it horizontally like this, and I'll put it about an inch down. It doesn't have really any specifics. You just want to make sure it's nice and covered where it doesn't dry out and it's not exposed to the light. So again, I will take a piece like this. This is a little bit larger piece, and I will place it about an inch down, maybe an inch and a half, and we'll cover it with a little bit more potting mix. And that will keep it nice and moist. You want to make sure they stay nice and moist while they're growing. You don't want them to be soggy where they'll cause them to rot, but you want to make sure that they stay moist just with good drainage. I'm going to take a few of these smaller pieces like this, and I will probably plant them together just because they will probably do okay. They have a little bit less likely chance of growing successfully, but they have all the chances still to grow. I'm going to plant them together because I can always separate them later if they're successful. So I will plant 2 or 3 of these small ones in a container, and I will just separate them later, and it just takes up less pots, there's less potting mix, things like that. And I will take our large piece here, and I'll probably have to cut this down just a little bit more. I think it's going to be a little bit too big for the pot. It may not be. Yeah, I may have to cut this down and let it re-suberize, which is no big deal. Let's see. I might be able to get it. Let's see what we can do. Yeah, I'll have to recut that one and let it suberize. As far as what kind of soil to use, I like to use a general purpose potting mix. I don't like it to be high in fertilizers to get started with, just because I have my own fertilizer schedule for the turmeric I grow and the ginger that I grow in containers. So I like to be able to decide what kind of fertilizer I use and when I apply it, because I believe I can grow a little bit healthier rhizomes. I can grow bigger rhizomes if I plan out the fertilizer myself, and I'll talk about the fertilizer schedule here in just a bit. But I start with a general purpose potting mix that's got good drainage and it's pretty low in fertilizer. You can get a potting mix that has fertilizer in it. Just try to get it on the low side. You don't want it to be like 20% nitrogen or anything like that to start with, just because I'll talk about what kind of requirements turmeric needs as it's growing. So now that we've got these potted up, all there is waiting for them to grow. But luckily, you don't have to wait on that because I will skip forward in time here. Okay guys, after 2 or 3 weeks of growth, you're gonna start to see your turmeric sprout. And after a few weeks after that, you're gonna get a plant, a very lovely plant that looks like this. They have these large, lovely banana-like leaves, and their leaves get much, much larger than this. I'm gonna put a picture up on the screen right now to where you can see just how big the plant can get, how beautiful they are. So it goes to show you that turmeric grows very well in containers. It's a very easy plant to grow in containers. I have this one in a gallon pot. That's why it's a little bit bigger than what you're gonna see in those green pots like I planted them in just a minute ago. Once they get established, and once I know that they're gonna grow after they get maybe 1 or 2 leaves on them, I like to transplant them into something larger. You can put them into their own container, like a gallon container like this, or even larger, but my preferred method is to plant multiple plants in a very large container, like this. So I have 3 good sized plants in this large, like 3-gallon pot, I believe. Not entirely sure, but I like to put 3 plants into a container like this. And what that does is it provides competition. Normally, competition's not a great thing in plants, but in this case, it encourages the rhizomes to gather more nutrients. They're competing with each other, so they're wanting to store up as much nutrients as they possibly can. And that causes you to get a little bit thicker rhizomes. They'll be a little bit shorter, but they're gonna have a lot more mass to them. So you'll get a better harvest by planting 2 to 3 plants maybe per container. That's the way I tend to do it. That's the way I've found the best success. So again, you can plant them in their own container and they'll grow just fine. But I see a little bit more success in the plants that I put in large containers with multiple plants inside. And it also makes it where you don't have to use as many pots. You can have 1 big pot rather than 4 or 5 or 6 or more smaller gallon pots. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of requirements that turmeric needs for the best growth and the best success. As far as growing requirements go for turmeric, they're not picky plants. They like a highlight situation, so they love to have full sun if they can get it. If you're gonna grow it indoors, you wanna make sure that you put it in a highest light conditions that you can get. They like as much sunlight as they can get. As far as water requirements, this is where I run into the biggest issue sometimes. Turmeric likes water, but they don't like to be always wet. They don't like to have wet feet, is what they call it. So in this case, these turmeric plants in the background here are not really as happy as they could be because they're getting too much water in the greenhouse where I have them right now, which I plan to fix. The way I recommend for people to water their turmeric is to water them well and then let them dry down in between watering. So I let them dry out a bit before I water them again. I let the soil dry down and then I will water them again at that point. But I don't like them to stay constantly wet or they end up getting yellowed leaves and they'll start to get dead leaves and brown areas on the edges of the leaf. So again, they like to have good quality water and they like to be watered, but they like to dry down in between waterings. And that's a very important step to remember when growing both ginger and turmeric. They like water, but let them dry down in between waterings. So the way I like to fertilize my turmeric is I like to start out with watering them every 2 weeks with a diluted fish emulsion. So that stuff is very fishy smelling. I don't really like the smell, but the ginger and turmeric both absolutely love it. Turmeric is a big fan of nitrogen to get started with because what that's going to do is that's going to grow you some good leaves up top. It's going to grow the above ground biomass for you. That good nitrogen source from your fish emulsion is going to get the plant started. And so about 3 months into it or so, I switch over and I like to get a phosphorus organic fertilizer or a low salt fertilizer. It doesn't have to be organic, but I like to get a low salt fertilizer. I use a product called Medina Has to Grow. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I'll show you the bottle real quick. Alright guys, so this is what I use for my phosphorus fertilizer for most of my plants, including the turmeric. So it's a little stained here. It hangs out in the greenhouse, so the bottle's a little stained. This is Medina Has to Grow. It's a plant food that has 6-12-6 as its nutrients, so 6% nitrogen, 12% phosphorus, and 6% potassium. It's a really great plant food for any of your phosphorus needs, so I use it when I want to encourage flowering and fruiting and root growth in plants. I like to use it because it's easy to mix. It's got a nice little measuring top on here, put about 1 ounce per gallon. And I like to use this for the turmeric especially because it's a low salt fertilizer since turmeric's pretty sensitive to salt. Again, this isn't sponsored. This is just showing you, being transparent with what I like to use for my plants. And I've had good success with it in the past. So now that we've talked about light requirements, the water requirements, and my fertilizer schedule that I have for these turmeric plants. One of the things I should also mention is these are tropical plants. They do not like cold weather. So they do not grow very well when they get below 50 degrees. That's the minimum temperature that these will be okay in. So don't let them get below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. If it gets below that temperature where you live, bring them into a protected area like a garage or even in your house and give them a good sunny window. They should do fine there. But just make sure that they don't get below 50 degrees temperature wise. As far as harvest goes, like when do you harvest these? I would say it takes a good bit of time before you're ready to harvest. It takes at least 6 months or more before you get a good harvest off of these. And the way I do it is I cut the tops off and I just harvest the plants. You could try to save the plants by pulling out the whole plant, harvesting the rhizomes, trying to replant it, but I tend to see that they go through shock once you pull them up and remove the rhizomes. So give it a try. I may try it on a plant or two here in the next day or so, but I've never really gotten a lot of success out of trying to save the plant after harvest. So what I prefer to do is I prefer to just harvest the whole pot by cutting the tops off of these, and I harvest all the rhizomes underneath. I take some of those rhizomes from the plant and I save them to replant in the way that we showed you in this video, and I just start new from scratch on those plants. So I will show you a harvest video here in the next week or so. I have a plant back here, you might be able to see it. It's ready to harvest. It's not looking all that great right now just because, like I said, these plants are getting too much water where they're at. I'm going to try to move these smaller plants like this one to a better area where they can dry down a little bit and they will perk back up. So I'm going to go ahead and harvest that one because I need the space back here in the greenhouse for new projects. And these things are so ready to harvest that's about to bust the pot open. So I will do a whole video on how to harvest turmeric and the process of getting it harvested and dried down to where it will not rot on you and you can use it in different kinds of dishes. So if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. Let me know down in the comments if you have any more questions about how to grow turmeric in containers or any of the processes that I use. And if you'd like to see that harvest video, be sure to mention that down there as well so I can see if y'all like to see how this is harvested and how much we get from this container behind me. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Go check us out on Facebook and Instagram and hit that bell icon for notifications. Until next time, I hope you'll join me right here at The More You Grow.